I honestly am a pretty big fan of the camera approach. I just think
Hmm.
that I think Lidar clearly makes a lot of things easier. Like there are advantages to both, which is a boring kind of cop-out answer. Like I think that I think that eventually like there are ways of using cameras. Cameras can get the cost really low for the
Hmm.
vehicles. Like I would really like to have like to see every car be self-driving, and I think that that's like if I think that it's an obvious thing that people could do better.
So, before we jump into today's episode, I want to share a quick word from our partners at Terawatt. We all know the future of ride hail and autonomy is electric. New fleets are entering markets and need a base of operations, places to charge up and get back on the road. But they can't afford downtime, and that's where Terawatt infrastructure comes in. They take something complex and expensive, fleet charging infrastructure, and delivers, letting fleets focus on their core business of serving rides. Terawatt is building high powered charging hubs strategically placed right where ride hail demand is its highest. So think about 30 plus fast chargers in a central business district. Now that's a lot of power. Their sites are also designed to optimize AV fleet performance with 98% charger uptime, infrastructure for data offload, and thoughtful layouts that get vehicles in and out fast, all for a monthly fee. You can check them out at terawattinfrastructure.com, and we'll also leave contact information for the company in the show notes. All right, on to the episode. Chris Paxton is a roboticist who's worked all across the industry. He worked at Zoox on self driving cars while doing his PhD from Johns Hopkins, and then went on to work at NVIDIA, Metasphere, and at Hello Robot, where he worked on in home robots. He's currently leading AI innovation at Agility Robots, developing intelligent and useful humanoid robots. He's also the author of the Substack newsletter It Can Think, where he explores the latest in robotics and artificial intelligence. Chris, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm
Yeah.
doing well. So, what got you so interested in robotics back in the day?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think I've always found it interesting to think about how robots or how we interact with the world, like how do I as a person like understand what's happening, come up with like plans and turn those into actions and all of this. Like that kind of concretely thinking about how we think and interact with our environments. And I feel like one of the best ways of like digging into that is through building them. And that's robotics, right? And separately, I just think that robotics is in a lot of ways is the future. There's a lot of potential for doing good. Like I think self-driving cars will make the world a better place. I think humanoid robots will do the same, right? So I think and it's the shape of the future. So that's
So, Chris, I stumbled upon your Substack, I think a couple months ago now, when you wrote this post about the Waymo Zeekr. And according to Substack, it looks like it's one of your most popular posts. So tell me what inspired that post and what was sort of the general thesis of that.
So one of the things that has always been interesting to me is getting robots out in the real world. Like
Hmm.
self-driving cars are going to be one of the first places where this happens, in my opinion. And so I think what the reason that I wrote that and went through this is because I was really curious about one of the big questions. There's this big debate as to who's going to win, right? Whether it's going to be Tesla or Waymo or maybe one of the others, like Wait for Zoox, but it's probably going to be one of those two, right? So as
Yeah.
far as getting the self-driving cars out into the road, and so like one of the questions has always been like Tesla we know can make their cars the cheapest probably
Yeah.
like they're right we think that their cars will probably be like 25K 20K maybe right like in the long run
Well, they're cheap.
that's what they're
They're
aiming
already
for.
cheap, and there are
There
already
are
a lot of them, right?
yeah, and there's probably going to be more. So like, so your Waymo, right? Like
Hmm.
they have the most cars deployed. They work really well. They've got. I think that they have a lot of like they've been doing this for a very long time. They've got a lot of
Yeah.
experience and lead and all this stuff. But they're not a hardware company. They don't have the manufacturing stuff that Tesla
Yeah.
does. And as I said earlier, like I always have an admiration for the hardware side, trying to figure out how you can
Hmm.
make this work. So like so there's this question, right? Like how so like the current cars are Jaguars, right? They're not cheap.
No.
So like I thought it was really interesting to see this vehicle that is coming out there that they're deploying. Starting to see more and more of these cars. The other thing is the cool thing is that they co-designed it with Geely, with
Mm.
the Chinese automaker. So like
Yeah.
they like it's built to their specs. They've been working on this for a really long time with them now. And it's fascinating to see. And it's really interesting to me that also that this is like probably the first time that one of these like Chinese EVs has come out into the US in a
Yeah.
real way, right? Like when have you seen? I've never seen one
Yeah.
on the
I
street,
don't know. I
right?
bet a lot of people, I see a lot of people posting about the Zeekr. And so for those who haven't seen it, it's kind of like a blue minivan, kind of looks like the Zooks, but maybe a little bit more rounded, I would say. How do you describe it?
Yeah, it's like a little
Yeah, like a small
minivan. I
blue
don't. Yeah,
minivan, and people
yeah,
are seeing more of them now. And you're right. I don't even know if a lot of people know that it's a Chinese EV though. To start right there, right?
right. Yeah,
Yeah. So, I see them here in Los Angeles. They're in San Francisco. They're not, I don't believe they are live yet, in service for Waymo, but they're still testing them and they're kind of coming. But let's start with, so you mentioned the Jaguar I-PACE, the car, Waymo says that their recent number, they said they have 1,500 in the fleet currently was kind of the number they announced. I think as you and I have noted, it's a $70,000 to $75,000 MSRP vehicle. So, I mean, just from like, I always like to remind people like the Jaguar I-PACE is an expensive car, right? Like the
right.
average
Yeah,
Uber car is a 2 to 3 year old used Prius, maybe worth about 30K. So just sitting
right.
in the car, it's a much nicer vehicle. Can you talk a little bit about this Zeekr vehicle? So it's a custom, I guess, is it a custom brand or sorry, what was the development like for that you mentioned?
So my understanding of how it was developed is that they worked with Geely, like which is
Hmm.
the owner. So Zeekr is their EV, their EV imprint. So they own
Got
this
it.
brand. So it's like I guess Fiat first, Stellantis,
Hmm.
right? Like that kind of thing. And so they went with them to like make sure that all the internal wiring works. Cause like, okay, so like
Yeah.
you've got to place sensors at different locations.
Hmm.
You've got to do all of this work to make sure that like you put the cables into run connections to all the sensors, where you're going to mount the sensors. There's all this extra work, which is like tens of thousands of dollars estimated. Of course, I don't
Yeah.
know, like to add to the price of like the current Jaguars, right? Because they plus the base, you add in all the sensors. You also do all the wiring to connect things up and make sure that the robot
Yeah.
can actually drive around. And so they can do it. They can get all of this out of the way. They can make sure that like the car is like this nice spacious interior. It's built
Hmm.
to a high standard. It's got like it's all EV, good performance, designed for mass manufacture, so you can build
Yeah.
lots of them for relatively cheap. I think the Geely is like 30K retail for
Yeah.
the for like
And
the
so I
nice
guess
fleshed
just
out
to be
version.
clear,
Yeah.
Geely, the
Sorry,
Zeekr,
it's
they do,
Zeekr, not
yeah,
Zealy.
the Zeekr does
Yeah. My,
sell sort of a similar minivan in China that kind of looks like the Zeekr, basically, right? Is that the
that's
gist?
right. So my understanding of this is actually that it is the same chassis. Like they designed it
Got it.
for Waymo, and they are also selling it as
Oh,
like
interesting.
they add they co-designed it with them, and then now they add in like chairs and all this other stuff, all the stuff that
Right.
like because Waymo is gonna. My understanding of what happens here is that Waymo takes them out to their facility in Arizona, and
Hmm.
they they put everything in all the
Hmm.
electronics and stuff like that. Like that doesn't come from China. That comes
Oh,
from them.
interesting.
That comes from like their partner and them put it in their factory outside in Arizona. So like there's a frame that they get, which is the
Yeah.
battery and the motors and all that, some other stuff. But like, and they build the car, and separately, Zeekr takes that and sells this minivan basically in China, which is also looks like a pretty nice little vehicle to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, nice. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, so I think I just interviewed Neuro's chief operating officer. They talked a little bit about how they are planning on integrating more at the production level, with Lucid. So it sounds like this would be, that would be kind of like one step up in the vertical integration, right? Like, I guess, is it ideal to, when Geely is building these Zeekrs in China, like, all right, that's when we get all of the sensors in there. That's when we get all the hardware instead of sending them to America. I mean, that seems
yeah,
better,
right.
right?
Yeah. Right. As opposed to do that, like they have this very like complicated process to get the vehicles right now.
Yeah. So
I
even
would
though
think,
it's sort of
yeah,
a custom, I guess AV, it's not integrated at the production line, right? Which
no.
sounds like a bad thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It seems like it would be much better. Like, I mean, with Tesla, for example, is going to be able to vertically integrate the whole thing,
Right.
right? Like, so like that's a pretty big advantage in my opinion that they have. But
Yeah. But I guess
yeah,
if I'm looking at it with, sort of an optimistic point of view for Waymo, right? The first vehicle was
yeah,
the Jaguar I-PACE. Okay, it was expensive. And then they brought them to their factory in Arizona. They add everything on. And then now they're sort of working with an OEM to integrate it one
yeah,
step up. And then I guess the next piece would be, going even further up in the vertical integration, right? So I think
yeah,
it kind of leans into what you said earlier. Waymo has been very, I guess you could say slow, methodical, careful, right, in a lot of what
yeah,
they're doing versus Tesla and others maybe are taking a more aggressive approach.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That seems right.
Any sort of thoughts or insight on? I mean, I think I joked with you in our notes that ChatGPT told me there's a 247.5% tariff on Chinese made EVs. I don't know if you're an expert on
Yeah,
Chinese
I,
EVs and the tariffs, but I mean, I know that's the big thing that people tell me whenever we talk about, Chinese vehicles coming to America, right?
right. So my understanding is right now they've already bought a bunch of them, so they don't have to
Yeah,
worry about that for some
right.
portion of the vehicles. And they're trying to get some kind of like hardship exemption to
Hmm.
to keep these vehicles. Like it doesn't seem like that could possibly last to me, but I'm definitely no expert on this.
Yeah,
Like the other thing is that they have like the advantage of not being vertically integrated, of course, is that they can do the next car can be from someone
yeah,
else, right? They've
yeah.
been in talks with Hyundai for years,
That's a
right?
good
So
point.
like yeah, they could
Yeah.
figure something else out.
So
But
definitely probably a fair bet that, like you said, they already have, 100 or two or 300, who knows, but definitely a lot of vehicles because I've seen, dozens of
yeah.
them firsthand here in LA and in SF, but, they bought those before. But I think the key, like, tenet of your post was, I think you started your blog post is, hey, Waymo's got a great product, people love it, but they need to find a way to get more cars, right? So I guess the second piece of the equation, it seems pretty risky, and I would love to know, sort of based on your experience, because I'm sure you have to consider this, maybe not with AVs, but like sourcing parts or hardware, right? The things that you're running from China, like, are there, what are the things that folks in your industry right now are think about in regards to, like, can we, like, build vehicles, or can we build robots with parts from China if there's going to be a huge tariff slapped on in the future, right?
It's a real issue. I feel like there are more and more American options for these parts. People are trying to build up alternate supply chains, but
Hmm.
yeah, right now I think it's a problem. It makes things harder. Yeah,
What's the main solution? Is it to work with an American supplier?
yeah.
Or I guess
There's
non-Chinese, I guess you would say too.
yeah, a lot of people are working with non-Chinese suppliers, or you just like honestly, they build a lot of good parts. Some companies are just eat the cost. Sometimes prices go up. Yeah,
Got it.
like with stuff like batteries and EVs, I think it's pretty difficult not to work with China. So,
Got it. So if there's a
but
tariff, you sort of, and they're kind of the, 3x best option and you have to pay 2.5x more, then you just have to eat that cost, right?
yeah, that's my like again, I'm not a trade expert
Yeah.
on that kind of
Yeah, I
stuff,
don't know if
but that
anyone
is
is, to be honest. That's
no.
why.
Yeah, I think a
if
lot of
if I
people are
do a
trying to
whole
figure this
podcast
out.
on
Yeah,
trade,
yeah,
that's when things are really getting
right.
serious. But
Yeah,
for now, okay. So you also talked about the sensors. So I think everyone has been talking about lately how, okay, the cost of sensors has really come down
yeah.
over the past few years. I think you shared some good numbers around Lidar and cameras and radars. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, so I think that Waymo in particular has been building their own lidars in-house for a
Yeah.
long time. Like they've been trying to get them down to a very low price. I've seen different people give different estimates of what that price is, but
Yeah.
I think like the expectation was these things that used to be many tens of thousands of dollars are now sub 1,000 definitely, right? You can buy very good lidars for relatively cheap. That
For
means
a
that they are
thousand
able to
dollars or less
yeah,
for
or
Lidar,
something,
basically.
right?
Yeah.
And we don't know what theirs are, of course, because it is like their custom design that's all inside. I don't, right? But like, if you want to go buy lidars
Hmm.
from China, for example, like you can pay $1,000 for a good lidar, right? So there's
Gotcha.
like,
That's a good comparison.
yeah, right, and exactly. So I think like the prices are getting lower to the point where it's
Cameras
not
and radars you mentioned
huge.
are also quite cheap, hundreds of dollars per sensor there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So sensors have gotten a lot cheaper. The one big gap that I would have for this is like we don't know how much compute is. Like I would
Hmm.
expect that it's not that it's a good amount, but not too much. But
Yeah.
there's the yeah.
Okay. So this is something that's right up your wheelhouse, right? On the compute side. So tell me,
Yeah.
first of all, what does compute mean? These are NVIDIA chips or?
So Waymos are definitely not NVIDIA chips. They are
Mm,
using they have Google has their TPUs, right? So they're going to
mm.
be using their own silicon. But like I think in the
How big
post
is a
I
chip, by the way? Are we talking small or big or physically?
like well when I was I was like a lot of the times like they're just these like physically like that big like
Yeah.
it's like a gaming
Like
GPU right like
eight
the
by
ones
eight
that the one
inches?
yeah that's right they're
Okay.
small yeah right
Okay, so they're
yeah like
relatively small. Well, it's just funny,
yeah
right? Because, I think a lot of people are familiar with computer chips, right? Like I remember back in the day, I used to,
yeah
swap RAM or, I mean, those are tiny and these are a little
yeah
bit bigger, but we're not talking, multiple feet here.
no these are small this
Okay.
is like yeah like Nvidia has their chips like that's what a lot of people are
Yeah.
going to be using but Tesla and Waymo both have their own
Okay. So Tesla and
again it's
Waymo have their own chips.
yeah, like I don't know how much I don't again, this is one of these things where you just have to estimate
Hmm.
how much both it needs and how much it's going to cost them to actually put it into the car to run
Yeah.
this and like I think that that is my guess is that that's somewhere between like five to $15,000 worth of compute. It would be like a lot of compute.
Got
Like
it.
that's Waymo probably has so like a good like a call it like a good gaming desktop, like if you bought a new
Hmm.
one, right? For example, that would be like that's like one GPU. That's like $5,000, right? Three to
Got
five.
it.
So that's like,
And
yeah.
and what exactly are these chips doing? I get into the let's say I call my Waymo, I get into it and get in the car. What's it doing while I'm in the car?
So it's got to do all the thinking, right?
Hmm.
It takes in all those sensors and it puts them into different models. It runs object detectors and it predicts where things go and it just
Mm.
simulates and it predicts trajectories for all the different agents. So when you see these videos, or actually, I think there's even a display in the car, right, that shows you like
Yep.
what it can see. So like everything that's showing you is it goes through whatever their computers that they build into the car and like they're going to do things like detect like this is the object this there's an object over here, there's an object over there, and
Yeah.
like I think that this one is probably based on what I can see of it. This is probably a full person. They're probably walking in this direction. And then that goes into other things like other
Hmm.
software, which is going to do like predict like okay, now given all of this information, what do I do? Like, do I should stop at the light? I think this person's going to step out in front of me, so I'm going to slam on the brakes, all of that. And like how much thinking, how much, yeah. So this is it's a
Yeah.
question of like how complicated are the algorithms and models that they need to run to get to their level of autonomy. I mean, my expectation is pretty complicated, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a pretty difficult problem. Like, there's so much going on
Yeah.
that the
What
robots have to understand. Yeah.
what about all the data that these cars are gathering or that, when they map the cities ahead of time, how is that, sort of, I guess, integrated into the Waymo driver? Is that kind of in real time or is there some sort of like master, Waymo driver that they reference?
So the Waymo driver is it's like their term for their planning stack, like
Hmm.
their planning software. So it's running on the car. Like
Got it.
they are going to be that's going to do things like simulating like not simulating, but predicting where the robot goes, where the car
Got it.
goes, right? Right. Where all these agents are, all of that's happening. Yeah. So it has
Got
to
it.
fuse all of this online and make those decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm
Um,
going to put this in, kind of like dumb layman terms for me. I mean, it's kind of like a computer,
sorry.
right? You have
Yeah.
this operating system that you get your Mac with, and then, you're getting inputs. I guess that's the kind of unique part, right? All the sensors are
Yeah.
getting real-time inputs, and then the GPUs kind of have to crunch you use the software to crunch all of these inputs and make sure you don't hit anyone, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's
Seem to be doing a pretty good job so far. So
they do.
all
Yeah.
right.
They're
So
incredibly impressive.
the
Yeah.
compute is interesting. And then the last cost, I think major cost that you noted in your blog post was integration costs. And I don't know if there's a ton of detail here, but I think it's sort of like what you mentioned. I mean, basically making sure that these sensors, I guess you explained the integration costs actually.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's the part that they're doing at their factory,
Okay.
the
So like
Waymo
their
factory.
factory
And
part.
yeah, where
Yeah.
they take the car and they add in all this stuff. Like they've got it
Hmm.
that takes some amount of time and
Yeah.
money. And like yeah, but essentially it's like a full extra part of the manufacturing process because they're not getting fully built cars, right? Like they're getting fully built cars. They're not
Yeah.
getting autonomous cars, right?
Got it.
So
So
yeah.
if I'm summarizing from your blog post, and I know you have a couple caveats here, so if anyone wants to really get the details, we'll leave a link to your
Yeah.
blog post so they can see the caveats. And I know you're a little conservative in some of the places, but we've got $40,000 for the Zeekr mix, right? The vehicle is based on 10,000 for the sensors, might be a bit lower, 14,000 for the compute. I think it also might be a little bit lower, as you noted, and then an extra $10,000 for the integration costs kind of
Yeah.
actually putting everything together, $75,000 for the vehicle. And I think that estimate, it sounds like, is kind of on the conservative side. It could be even lower. Does that sound about right?
That's right. Yeah, I think what people followed up with me, like either left comments or messages or
Yeah.
so on,
Yeah.
was
What kind of feedback did you get
like
on the
they.
post?
I mean, I think a lot of it was good. A lot of people were. I mean, people liked it. I think if anything, all the caveats were along those lines. Like, I don't think Nvidia needs this much compute. I don't think this car needs that
Hmm.
much compute. I don't think like they're definitely not paying Nvidia's margins, so you can cut the
Yeah.
compute down. Like they're like because I based that compute estimate based off of a very nice workstation that we used at Meta. So this is like
Got
it's
it.
probably a little bit more than you need.
Yeah.
Like
Well, but
and
I think that's a
yeah,
good sort
right.
of comparison, right? If you
Yeah.
know the actual cost of something and Waymo's
Right.
developing this internally and doesn't have a margin, I mean, I think it's a fair assumption,
Yeah.
right? This is a pretty
Yeah.
well-run company, right? They should be cheaper than that public price
Right.
point, right?
Yeah. So my guess is that I think you could go down to like 50 to 60K
Yeah.
and up to 75 at the high end. Whereas like I'm pretty convinced that my end number is at the high end,
Yeah. I
like
mean, I think
of
this
what's reasonable.
number, do you think this number was surprising to a lot of people? Because I know that, I thought it was a bit surprising. I mean, it all makes sense and checks out, but I think like you noted, right, a lot of people, Waymo has said themselves in the past, a year or two ago, okay, cost of 150, $175,000 all in for their Jaguar I-Pace. Obviously, that's
Right.
with a $75,000 car, like we talked about, but it's kind of a big jump in a few years to go from 150, 175 all the way down to 50 to 75, right?
Yeah, I mean they've been working on it for a long time. I think that
Hmm.
the minivans, the Pacificas before that, just because of all the compute and the sensors and integration costs and all this
Yeah.
ended up being like more expensive than the Jaguars. Like
Hmm.
so
Oh,
like
really?
yeah, I think so. Well, not the cars
Yeah, for
themselves,
sure. That
obviously,
makes
but all
sense.
the
Yeah.
other stuff, right? Like, and so like you end up with the yeah. I think it's just like it's a steady downward slope to get it to. So like the question is like, will they be able to get this cheaper before Tesla manages to ramp their takeoff? And like that's the
Yeah.
big question, right? Like,
Well, let's talk about what are those areas where you think have the most room to, sort of reduce the cost in that Zeekr stack that we talked about.
I mean I think that like basically everything. Like I think that the sensors, the pro actually whatever the sensors are, I like my estimate may be high, but whatever the sensors are, I think they're probably gonna have trouble getting up below that, is my
Mm-hmm.
guess, unless they really start like actually stripping them out and replacing them with cameras. But
Mm-hmm.
like I just assume that they've spent 10, 15 years now working on these lidars, trying to make them as good as they can.
Got it.
But sorry, but then the other ththing is that so once we so the compute, they can always like try to distill whatever models they're using,
Yeah.
simplify the approach, get that down, get that smaller.
Hmm.
There's the big thing, which is the integration. Obviously, like they've got this complicated supply chain where they build it in another country and
Yeah.
ship it, and then have a second factory put everything in.
Yeah.
And like I have to imagine if they had a closer partnership, like Neuro or like Tesla, then never maybe that close, but like if they have a really close manufacturing partner, maybe they can get this whole
Yeah.
thing cheaper because it doesn't need to be built for two purposes, right? Like,
Yeah, the integration seems like a big opportunity because we're seeing companies, again, right? It's like we don't know how these things
yeah,
work, but I'm seeing Uber invest $300 million dollars into Lucid's basically production, so someone's
yeah,
seeing potential, right? So I think that if I'm Waymo, of course, they might like a partner to shoulder some of that financial load, right? Like work with an
yeah.
OEM here in the US or in Asia, right? To kind of
Mhm.
retrofit and kind of do it at that production line. And I think that's also where sometimes it gets above my pay grade because I feel like they start kind of,
Yeah,
I can depreciating some of these costs or they don't count them in some of the, like how when they invest a lot, right? How that transfers to the P&L is sometimes a bit confusing. So I'm not even going to try to explain it, but I know it's above my pay grade, but it does seem like that integration is a big opportunity.
yeah, definitely. It seems like I agree with that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. So we've got integration. And how do you think this new Zeekr stacks up, in a fight versus the Jaguar I-Pace?
it seems like it'll be bigger and roomier. Like you can fit four people in it, right? I think
Yeah.
this is actually a big thing, right? Because like if you want to like have go with friends or take a family instead of just like the two seats or whatever that you get in the Jaguar. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. The Jaguars are
Well, I
really
mean, you
nice
get
cars
four
though.
seats in the
Yeah,
Jaguar. You get
I
three in the
guess yeah,
back and one in the front, and you obviously can't sit in the driver. But it is, I was just joking. I just wrote in my newsletter last week. I was
yeah.
trying to do a call out. Who likes to sit in the front of the Waymo? Because it's way more comfy in the front than in the back, right?
Oh yeah,
Obviously, traditionally, vehicles have been designed for people that sit in the front. It's actually safer to sit in the front seat than it is in the
yeah,
back, right?
right.
So, yeah, it does look bigger, roomier. Are there any technical advantages that Waymo, might think about? Do they want to switch to just the Zeekr? Do they want to keep, the I-Pace and the Zeekr? What do you think about from like a fleet perspective might be some advantages or disadvantages? What should they be thinking about?
I think that from a fleet perspective, it makes the most sense to me to just have one car.
Hmm.
Like, so I would imagine that they start, like, if they have enough, if they can manage to get enough of them, I would imagine they slowly start switching over to the Zeekrs, just because then your supply chain's all the same, and like you don't
Yeah.
need different maintenance experts for different things. You don't need whatever expensive parts the Jaguar requires. I don't know how much of a pain the Jaguars are to maintain,
Well,
but
I think
like,
if you've ever
yeah,
owned a Jaguar, I think the number one complaint is repairs and
yeah, right,
issues with supply chain. So,
right.
so from a fleet perspective, one vehicle, obviously they've got 1,500 I-Pace right now. They might have a few hundred more Zeekrs, maybe more in the future. You think it makes sense to just have one car? I guess what about and then I guess with that Zeekr, obviously they probably want to get it more vertically integrated, right?
I would think so. Yeah.
From a
I mean,
production
yeah.
perspective.
I mean, unless I would guess, and this is just rampant speculation that I know nothing about, that
Go for
like
it. That's what we're
that
here for.
like right. I would guess that they would like just unless trade uncertainty gets a lot better, I would have to
Yeah.
imagine they start working more with Hyundai or someone who can do
Got it.
all
Well, I
this
guess
without
that's
that.
my
Yeah.
question, right? Like
Right.
with the
Like
Chinese EVs, I mean, it feels like
yeah.
that's a big risk with the trade uncertainty. Is that stuff that you have to consider in your job, or is that sort of, folks more on the business side, or whose kind of
That's not
responsibility is
something
that?
that's not something I
Okay.
would God, yeah,
But I mean,
no.
it does,
Yeah.
I mean,
It does
it's all
matter.
kind of
Yeah.
related, right? The hardware, the software, and,
Yeah.
the supply chain, right? If you're designing something and it's the best design ever, but you can't get the parts, right? Obviously
Definitely.
that has an impact. So does
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
ever come into play in your work, or is it sort of
No, that doesn't really come
not
into
really?
play for what it's worth. No, that's
Okay.
yeah, I've never had any problems. But yeah.
Got it. So
No,
one thing I was wondering about, just more broadly, I mean, you
yeah.
worked early at Zooks and you've obviously been in this space for a while. What's the expensive part of an AV these days, and how has that kind of changed over the years?
That's a good question. I feel like from my point of view, like the LiDAR used to be a much more expensive part. Like let's
Got
say
it.
that's like I think the sensors, the biggest win has been on the sensor side, right?
Mm,
Like whereas I don't think there have been wins on like the compute side, but not as big, right? And now at least they're like I think like it was pretty common back then to have like
mhm.
actual like NVIDIA gaming GPUs or something like or like
Yeah.
NVIDIA machine learning GPUs and stuff in the car, which is definitely less true now. Like companies like Tesla and Waymo again have like their own chips. NVIDIA builds its own automotive chips as opposed to like just using other cards,
Right.
right? So like there are things are so on I think on every side basically things have gotten cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned Tesla a few times now. It sounds like you might have some thoughts on the company or the approach. I mean, I think they're actually a good example of, I think Elon used to always say
Yeah.
LiDAR is too expensive. We gotta use cameras. What's his famous line? If I can see with my eyes, the camera or the car should be able to see
Yeah.
with cameras, right? But what do you think about their kind of camera only approach and, kind of what they're doing?
I mean, I honestly am a pretty big fan of the camera approach. I just think
Mm,
that like I think LiDAR clearly makes a lot of things easier. Like there are advantages to both, which is a boring kind of cop-out answer. Like I think that the I think that eventually like there are ways of using cameras. Cameras can get the cost really low for the
mm,
vehicles. Like I would really like to have like to see every car be self-driving, and I think that that's like if I think that it's an obvious thing that people could do better.
got it.
But like radar and stuff on the cars though, like Tesla doesn't even have radar anymore, which
Right.
I think is kind of a waste. That's kind of a shame. It'd be, that's like
Yeah,
so
because
cheap
radars are
compared to the
so
others.
cheap,
Yeah,
right?
right. Like,
Yeah. So I mean, I
but
guess
maybe yeah,
what do you think about this notion that, okay, lidars have gotten so cheap now? Maybe 10
they
years
have.
ago, camera
Yeah,
only made sense if you were kind of going from that bottoms up
yeah.
approach. Why not throw one? Definitely, it sounds like throw a radar onto a Tesla and, throw a lidar too, right? Why not do that?
So I guess the difference is that so it depends on whether you think the cars will be owned by people or will be fleet. So like my
Hmm.
guess from like the reports that like that I looked at in that blog post is that like Waymo probably will make a pretty good margin on running a taxi fleet, right? Like
Yeah.
if you are thinking still of selling to consumers though, the margins on those are really, really low. So
Mm.
like I think that LiDAR might make a lot more sense again for Waymo than it does
No,
for
that's a good
Tesla,
point. Yeah.
right?
Although Tesla is also trying to launch a
Yeah,
robotaxi
and
fleet.
yeah, right. And so who knows? So maybe the math will change. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, but the point is
It,
like a car that's running 24 hours
yeah.
can be a lot more expensive. Like
Right.
when,
That's a
like
good
a
point.
few years ago, a lot of the price estimates for these were like $300,000.
Yeah.
Like that when I like this is many years ago when this field was like really like trending up in 2018 or so.
Yeah.
Like how much a self-driving car would cost without the lidars and computer and so on.
So
This
I've
is a
got a good
lot
technical
more.
question for you.
Yeah.
When Waymos have a lot of hardware, right? Is there any downside to having too much hardware, right? Like what's there for, kind of safety? What's there, maybe you start getting inputs from lidars, from radar. Like, is there any potential for conflict? Like, what's the sort of sweet spot there on the sensor side? And, are there any kind of negatives to having too many sensors?
I mean, I think that yeah, it's a good question. I think that the biggest issue that you would get is it comes down to like if this is like reliability of the whole system, right? If it
Hmm.
really relies on having the lidar and the sensor operational, what if it's like what you're going driving under a bridge and like a rock falls and takes out a lidar and
Yeah.
like the nice thing about having like lots of
Well,
cheap
hopefully it just pulls
cameras,
over.
well, hopefully,
Yeah.
well, but like that if that creates a blind spot,
Yeah.
now how does it safely pull over? So like
True.
if this happens once a year, or sorry, if this happens like once every like
Well,
1,000 cars.
let's say it
Like
happens
you're
once a
gonna,
million, once one in a million. I tell people a lot, Uber does 30 million rides a day. So you'd have 30 cars that are going to have, pretty major issues, right? If that 30 rocks fall
right.
onto a car and that's a one in a million occurrence.
Yeah. And even if 29 of those pull over successfully, you still got
Yeah.
one person that hit someone because there was
Yeah,
something in
that's
the blind spot.
interesting.
Right. Or maybe it stops, maybe it just like has to stop and turn its blinkers on and someone hits it from behind. Like
Mm.
this is so sensor redundancy is important. And it's
Mm.
harder to have that, I think, if you have like a bunch of different very specialized sensors. Whereas like if I
Got it.
cover the car in like really cheap cameras, maybe it's not such a big deal.
So is the
Maybe it is. Who
sensor,
knows? Yeah.
yeah, is the sensor
Right.
redundancy, do you think it's more important because of scale? Like once Waymo starts doing millions of rides, or is it more important because we can't screw up now? Does that make sense? Or
Yeah.
both?
I mean, I think it's always important. I do feel Waymo has done a really good job with a very slow and careful rollout that
Hmm.
has been really safe, right? Like there's been really no notable incidents, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it would be a real shame if something went wrong and that
Yeah.
changed, right? And there's still things that they seem reluctant to do, like driving. I think they still haven't started driving.
Still
Yeah,
not, yeah, no
still
airports.
not
I
on
think that's more of a
highways,
regulatory, no highways is the big,
right?
I guess you would say, complaint from people. Although, they
Right.
are testing and, they've taken a journalist for a ride on a freeway. So they must feel pretty decent about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
not
But
for the
like
public
companies
yet.
have been working on highway driving for
Hmm.
years, for like almost 10 years now. And it's still like it's one of the things where like they've made really steady progress. Everyone's made really steady progress on these taxi stuff, but less on highways. Why is that? I actually am not totally sure. But like
Yeah.
one option is just because of stopping distances and because the lidars can't get resolution far enough out to really do stuff reliably. I'm not sure if that's true anymore. Like it used to be
Hmm.
true for sure. Right. But yeah, so like but it seems like maybe it comes up rarely, but you were driving really fast and that's important. And of course, the Teslas can do highways.
Yeah.
Now, they can't do anything as reliably as Waymo, but like, so again, it's these questions. Who will figure it out first? I don't know. It's
Yeah.
fun to speculate.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on sort of the Waymo versus Tesla approach? If I really wanted to put you on the spot, if you had to pick a company to work for, which one would you work for?
Probably, probably Waymo, I think, is still
Waymo.
the one. I think the thing is that I think Waymo is still like for all that we talk about all the cameras and like whether Tesla's like end-to-end stuff is better. I think this is something that more in the machine learning space we talk about whether or not you should do like
Hmm.
end-to-end or versus Waymo is more modular, traditional robotics kind of software. And like but like I think the differences aren't as big as they appear. I think that a lot of times Waymo's been doing a lot of I think Waymo could do this could probably drive with just cameras at some point and
Hmm.
like maybe they will start really changing their systems and but I like their approach. I think that they've been just and they're so far ahead in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like I really am impressed. Like I've of course ridden in the Waymos too. I love the vehicles.
Yeah.
They're so cool. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you brought up a couple interesting points. I think that Waymo, they could do cameras only. They probably could do freeways, but I think, like you said, they're taking it slow and, very
Yeah.
methodical, very careful,
Yeah.
and they are the leader. And honestly, they really don't have any competition. It's a little funny right now with, I see a lot of people posting about Tesla's expanded, size of their robotaxi area. I say there's still a driver in the car. I don't know if you
Oh,
can really
yeah.
expand a robotaxi. I mean, I guess you can, but
You can.
it's a
Yeah.
bit more
Right.
marketing than substance, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it sounds like
It's
you're bullish on Waymo.
I am. I mean, I do want to say, like, I think that like Tesla's FSD is really impressive. Like, it
Yeah,
really does
great
work
product.
very well. It's really great, and like that Tesla is like this is the right thing to do for where they are is putting the person in the car and having the for the robotaxi service. I think that it's like they're doing everything right at this point. It's just like they're further behind. So
Yeah.
like we'll see what happens, right? Like,
Although, what I have heard, and I haven't verified this
yeah,
yet, but I have heard from a couple folks that are considering engineering jobs from Waymo. They actually don't pay as well. Tesla supposedly pays a lot more than Waymo. And I think Waymo, a lot of folks that they're hiring, they're kind of selling them more on the upside. Hey, we're giving you, shares in this private company that's going to be worth a lot, someday versus Tesla. And it sounds like, especially others, I think that we've seen the big stories about Meta, offering billions and hundreds of millions.
sure,
So
yeah,
some
yeah,
of these companies are definitely paying a lot for sure, right? Any
definitely,
thoughts
yes.
there?
Oh, no, I mean, it makes sense. I think that like Waymo is in a really good position, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that their margins and stuff look probably really good. They're probably going to make a good amount of money when they go public,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think that when it comes to Tesla, like, I mean, I think Tesla is a really good place, seems like a really good place to like work really hard for a while and distinguish yourself. And like all those people are really intense. It's a
Yeah.
very different kind of environment than
Got
a
it.
lot of other tech companies, right? Like,
Got it.
which I think is, yeah, I don't know.
Very
So
cool. And before we let you go, any other insights on other companies or different approaches that we haven't talked about yet? And we talked a lot of Waymo, Tesla. There's others, obviously. There's Wave and Neuro. I think I mentioned to you offline that, I had a recent exec from Apollo Go, who's sort of the Waymo of China, and they
yeah,
said the all-in cost of their RT6, the latest generation of their vehicles, is 30,000. And I kind of, I thought to myself, oh man, I don't know if I believe that. And now, kind of after talking to you, that actually seems like it
I
might be
think,
because they do have that vertical integration. They are, Chinese obviously
yeah,
are very good at manufacturing and, the sensors
no.
and, they sort of have a very, you know, yeah. So, I mean, I think it's actually plausible. Any thoughts there?
I mean, I believe it. I think that they're really good at this kind of stuff. Like the one that
Yeah.
I've been had my eye on is the on the Chinese robot side. There's the new Unitree robot, which is like $6,000 for
Oh,
a humanoid
cool.
robot that they're going to be selling soon. It's just incredibly cool. Really impressive engineering. Their team is really good. They're really genuinely very good. The other, Wave is one that I have my eye on the self-driving car front. Like they've been doing their pilots. They have what I consider to be a much more like modern AI stack than
Hmm.
like AI approach, more like Tesla full self-driving than what Waymo historically has done. So
Got
like
it.
if there's one to watch, they're the one that I mean, I think they're obviously well behind everybody else, but they're one that I've
Yeah.
always had my eye on, like, or
Yeah,
have
so
recently had,
Wave, so we had their CEO on the podcast, and I think
yeah,
that Alex talked a lot about this end-to-end approach, mapless,
yeah,
very similar to Tesla. And I keep hearing, I basically make every guest explain this to me, but it sounds like Wave and Tesla are in this AV 2.0 kind
right.
of approach, whereas Waymo sort of took an AV 1.0 approach. What is the difference there?
So I do think that the difference here is whether or not they are Waymo, to my knowledge, builds a bunch of different components. So like we talked about the sub problems
Hmm.
earlier, right? When we were talking about what the compute is doing. So like it's predicting where the objects are, it's predicting like these are the trajectories that things are going
Got
to
it.
follow, right? So that's when I'm talking about end to end, so like versus modular. The modules are the things doing those components. So like
Mm.
trajectory prediction, right? So this predicts like the person's going to cross the street.
Mm.
And then someone else in a different unit of the company says like, okay, so someone's going to give me trajectory predictions, and
Got it.
then I'm going to do this. And now the difference is that with companies like Wave and Tesla, instead, there are no two different teams. There's no two different things. Like maybe there is a single model that it might even output all these things. I think Tesla's actually does
Mm.
output all this stuff for like visualization, but like
Hmm.
it's just this is there. It's not like it's one thing doing the whole operation, and that's the difference between them. It's a question between whether or not things will be like it's how integrated the different components are, and it's also like whether how data driven everything is, like versus like saying a person knows this is the right way to divide this and the right way for information to flow between them. And what we usually see is that if you have enough data and enough time and enough money to make it all work, it's better just to not have a
Hmm.
person make those decisions and just get the data and do the best thing. And so that's, yeah, so it's why I think in the long run Waymo's been taking steps in this direction. Like they've done some tests without lidars. They've done more and more tests on like scaling prediction data. And it seems
Yeah.
like I fully expect that in 10 years, all these things will look a lot more similar. But right, and Waymo has the expertise and ability to do it. Like if they need to, when they want to, they are conservative, like we said. So that's the
Yeah.
difference. Yeah.
So it sounds like the sort of 1.0 model that Waymo started working on 10, 15 years ago was a lot more modular inputs, basically, different kind of pieces of the puzzle fitting together. And now it's kind of like one big puzzle. Does
That's the
that sort
way,
of?
yeah. So that's the way, like the way that you would build it now, like the way that Wave
Mhm.
and Tesla are building their newer things. So like it's one piece, one
One
module,
piece.
right? Like,
And what was
and
the
that's
kind of impetus or inflection point? Why did that 2.0 model kind of take over and is now seems like everyone says that's the way to go?
I think the reason is because it started to work. Like the
Mm.
story at Tesla is that the story is that an engineer tried it and like they were really impressed by the results, and that's when like
Mm.
the Autopilot 12 came out that it and right. So it wasn't it was like kind of a bottom driven, which is another mark in Tesla's favor,
Hmm.
by the way. If you're working there, is that like I think that you have much more ability to distinguish yourself, is my
Come up
impression,
with a good
because it's
idea
less.
no matter
Yeah,
who or
yeah.
where you
That's
are.
that's
Someone
the
will.
story, at least. Like I don't know how true it is, but yeah.
So
But
did the
like the
compute and hardware, sort of the cost coming
yeah,
down and the compute getting better have any impact
yeah,
on, I mean, it
those.
sounds like this is more complex, right? To have one big thing that can handle everything all
Um,
at once, right?
Yeah, so train modeling techniques have gotten better, like training has gotten better. Compute for the training side and for the cars has gotten better.
Yeah.
The other big thing is that now, like the big limiting factor before, a lot of it was data. Tesla has millions of miles of data
Hmm.
of like, and so does Waymo and everybody. So like Wave has managed to scale an impressive data operation without a lot of this. So without like having millions of cars on the road. So like that's something that I've always been impressed by from that team. But like but it's just comes down to like it needed more time to cook, I guess. Like now the stuff is there. Now things are ready. Uh,
Makes sense. Awesome. Well, I think that's a great point to end on, Chris. Really appreciate you coming on. For those who are not already subscribed to your Substack, we'll leave a link. It Can Think. And then you've got a blog post. The first mass produced robotaxi is here. That's all about Waymo's new Zeekr. You've got a couple other great AV posts and all things robotics. So, really appreciate you coming on, Chris.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. A lot of fun.